A lot of you have heard about the people who died because of dirty water in Flint, but do you know what the water did to the brains of the kids in Flint, Michigan? That is a haunting part of the story. To help us discuss it and find out the facts, we're going to bring on Anthony Baxter, who's an award-winning director who made the movie Flint. He's also made You've Been Trumped 2, A Dangerous Game, and Eye of the Storm. Anthony, welcome back to the TYT.
Thanks for having me, Cenk.
No problem. So, first of all, I want to clarify something that's really important. The people who died in Flint died from Legionnaire's disease, not from the lead. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we know officially there are 12 deaths registered from Legionnaires, but the true number is believed to be much higher, around sort of 50. And that's because we know about the pneumonia deaths, which has similar characteristics in pneumonia death to a death from Legionnaire's disease. But yeah, that's right. In Flint, the lead hasn't killed anybody as such. It has damaged people horrendously, of course, but it's also true that many mothers have talked of the loss of their unborn children as well through the poisoning in Flint, and all of the other chemicals that are in the water, of course. I mean, we know about the lead, which you've mentioned there, Cenk, and also Legionnaires, but there's also other contaminants. I mean, people's hair was falling out, people have skin rashes. A lot of that is still unexplained today.
So I want to talk about why they made this decision and the consequences, because there are actually people facing criminal consequences, politicians, which is unheard of in America, so that's interesting. But the reason I started with Anthony asking you about Legionnaire's disease versus lead is because since the lead does long-term damage as opposed to Legionnaire's disease, which instantly can kill you, right? I think I'm worried that there's 3,000 towns that have lead problems in their water right now. Reuters did a huge story about it several years ago. But since it's not killing people on the spot, we're kind of ignoring the same thing that happened in Flint with lead happening all across the country because it's not jumping out to us as more immediate. So that's why I wanted to go to that amazing fact. You talk about what happened to the kids, their average test scores 3 years later. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the test reading results of children have plummeted in Flint, and that's a group of children studied by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the local pediatrician who made the link in the first place between the high lead levels in Flint. Because just to remind your viewers, Cenk, about what happened, the water source was switched in Flint, as you may remember, from the Great Lakes to the local river. And the local river, it was the corrosion of that water, the corrosive nature of that water that damaged the pipes across the city of Flint. And as you rightly say, we know that so many cities across the United States and in my country as well, in Britain, has the same issue. These lead pipes buried deep beneath the ground. We don't really know the full extent of what's going on down there a lot of the time. And when you pump corrosive water through the system, as what happened in Flint, it interacts with that protective layer in the pipes, and it tore that protective layer off, the corrosive water, because it hadn't been treated properly. And that is what led to those, as scientists said at the time, you may remember, this toxic waste levels of lead, big chunks of lead coming off these pipes and into people's homes, a population in Flint at the time of around 100,000 people. And the impact that has had is just devastating, because we do know that children's reading score levels have plummeted in the tests that have been done by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha and others studying the impact of the lead poisoning on children in Flint. But there's so much more that we don't know. And I think that's why I think it's so important that the story of Flint isn't forgotten because of the many, many cases around the country, as you say, where similar things have been going on since. And it's so easy, isn't it, with all that's going on in the world, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the cost of living or whatever it is, for the spotlight to move on to other stories. But I just think it's really crucial that the story of what happened in Flint and what happened to the children and the people right across the city is not forgotten.
So guys, when they switched the water to the dirty water, and we'll get to why in a second, it created the diseases that killed people fairly immediately, but it also corroded the pipes, as Anthony just explained, which caused the lead to come out. The lead does brain damage. There is excellent analysis showing that the excess lead in our oil, by the way, the gas that we use in our cars, the paint that we use, et cetera, caused a massive spike in crime in the 1970s and 80s. That it wasn't related to any policy, it was related to the lead. And now we're seeing it again, now that the lead is in the water, to the point that Anthony was making. I'll give you the stat. 3 years later, reading scores had dropped more than 70%. Just in 3 years, dropped 70%. That is unbelievable. Lead literally causes brain damage. So, and it is not just Flint, guys. 3,000 towns across the country. And you don't know it until it's too late in a lot of these instances. But now we do know because of movies like this and the attention that's being paid, and yet we're not doing nearly enough. So let me go back, Anthony, to the original cause of this in this particular town. They were getting the water from the lakes and it was working fine for 5 decades. Why'd they make the switch in the first place?
Well, Governor Rick Snyder, and I remember you covering this story extensively at the time, Cenk, he wanted to save money. He sent in so-called emergency managers into Flint to help to save cash. Now, the people in Flint were paying and are still paying the highest water bills in the United States. And so the bean counter saw a possibility of reducing the costs of the water that they were getting from the Great Lakes, which came via Detroit and was piped to Flint. And they saw the opportunity to cut costs by switching to the local river. And there's a water plant in Flint, which your viewers will recall that tower that's become the Flint Water Tower, which has become so striking as an emblem for this story. And the water tower and the water plant was an aging water plant. And they decided to switch the water source to the river to save cash, but they didn't do any of the homework. They didn't realize that this water was so much more corrosive than the lake water from Lake Huron. But as well as that, of course, there's a history in Flint in industry and car manufacturing. And what they found was that this new water source started to corrode the parts at General Motors. And when I first arrived in Flint, it was early 2015. It was before the story became a big national story. Nobody really heard what was going on. I was in Detroit doing a screening of a previous film, A Dangerous Game, which you mentioned, which has a water theme to it. And at that screening, one of the residents said to me, you should come through to Flint to do something on the water here, because we've been complaining about it since it switched to the Flint River in April 2014. So by that stage, the local people had been jumping up and down for a year about what was going on. Their hair was falling out, skin rashes. They suspected this high level of lead because the water color was foul. It was a brown color. People remember residents holding up jugs of brown water on the local TV news. And nothing was being done. And it was a classic case of people jumping up and down, calling on people in power, Rick Snyder, the governor at the time, and the local mayor to do something about it. But they just ignored it. They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with the water. And the mayor was on TV drinking it, saying, this is a fuss about nothing. And the residents called in Dr. Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech to oversee a citizen science test of the water right across the city. So everybody took part in this and took these samples of the local water. And it was Dr. Mark Edwards' team from Virginia Tech that then certified that this water had a very high lead level count in it. And that was the moment when that happened was August 2015. I remember it very, very clearly. And then Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the pediatrician I mentioned from the local hospital, she then made the link between when the water had switched to the river and the lead levels then shooting up in kids right across the city. And this was a fact now, and the local authorities couldn't ignore it, and Governor Rick Snyder then decided to switch the water back to the Great Lake source. But it was too late because the damage had been done, the pipes had been corroded, and ever since then, the people of Flint have lost trust completely in their water. I mean, I was there just a few weeks ago, and still the queues around the block, there are queues for blocks and blocks of people waiting to pick up bottled water because they just don't trust it. They don't trust the water, even though the scientists now say that the water in Flint is as safe as any other city in the United States.
Yeah. So by the way, that idea of bringing in businessmen to run government is disastrous on two counts. One, everybody assumes that businessmen are competent. Really? Have you met businessmen? So they're not a model of competence either. And secondly, more importantly, business culture is all about money, 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 money. And it doesn't care about other factors as much. That's a terrible model for the government that's supposed to protect people and emphasize lives over money. So it was a disaster waiting to happen. But last thing here, Anthony, and by the way, the movie's available on iTunes and Amazon, and you could, it's still out in theaters in some places, so flintdocumentary.com for you guys to be able to get the information about the movie. But last thing is, so is there accountability? It looks like there might actually be some in this case for politicians, which is actually remarkable. So tell us about that.
Well, there doesn't seem to be any accountability. I mean, there's a case going on at the moment, but there have been cases that have come and gone, collapsed. Millions and millions of dollars has been spent on these cases, these court cases, so supposedly to hold people to account for what happened and the terrible damage that has been done to people across Flint. But no, to date, nobody has gone to jail. The people of Flint have not received a cent of compensation yet. I mean, there's supposedly some payouts coming later this year, but they won't amount to much by the time it's all divvied up. I mean, once you divide what sounds like a big lot of money around 100,000 people, it doesn't go very far. So the accountability for the people of Flint is just dreadful. I mean, they have not. You'll remember they were calling at the time for Rick Snyder to go to jail for what happened and his team. Nothing's happened as far as the local people are concerned. They just have to watch and see these officials, come and go out of courtrooms and the millions of dollars that are spent. And when I'm there, as I was just a couple of weeks ago, we showed the film in Flint to local residents. It's palpable, the sense of injustice, the fact that there hasn't been people held to account, there hasn't been that justice for the people of Flint, and there hasn't been the money spent on not only the sort of the replacement of the pipes right across the city, which has been done in some places, but it's a patchy situation. They haven't replaced all the pipes. That's what the people wanted right from the start. They wanted big federal money to come into Flint, fix the pipes, sort it out once and for all. That hasn't happened. So today, the situation is bleak, and that trust has completely been shattered. And we focus a lot on that in the film, how the various people came into Flint when that vacuum was created after the water disaster first happened, and they switched the water to the local river. Or ever since then, this breakdown in trust, this lack of accountability has left the people of Flint just reeling, really, and having to pick up the pieces and continue to live their lives with all else that's going on in the world, whether it's COVID or whatever. And that mistrust continues today, very sadly.
Yeah, so you could tell Anthony's not from America originally, not because of the accent, because when Governor Richard Snyder is awaiting trial on criminal counts, Americans are generally thrilled with the appearance of accountability. We don't actually expect accountability. It's America. There is a 0% chance that anyone who is rich or powerful is going to be held accountable, let alone politicians. Impossible, right? But the fact that they're bothering to go through the optics and the semantics of it, we're like, whoa, look at Michigan with a tiny bit of optics of accountability. That's the sorry state that America finds itself in. All right, the movies Flint and Kidding Aside, iTunes and Amazon, that's where you could get it. Anthony Baxter, thank you for joining us, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk.